If you make, let's say $75,000 a year right now in a major Western city like Miami or New York or LA,
right,
you are likely, well, you're probably barely scraping by.
Yeah.
Like you feel it every single time you check your bank account.
Oh, absolutely. It's that constant low-level panic.
Yeah, exactly. But so here's the crazy part. If you take that exact same laptop, doing the exact same job, earning that exact same 75 grand, and you just open it in a cafe in Nairobi, you are instantly catapulted into the top 5% of that country's earners.
It's wild. It is a radical reframing of, how we view our careers.
It really is.
For decades, the default assumption has always been that upward mobility requires physical proximity. Like, you have to be in major Western financial hubs. But what happens when the cost of existing in those hubs mathematically destroys your ability to actually build wealth?
And that is exactly the mission for our deep dive today. We are looking at this brilliant, really deeply challenging script authored by M. Rowe.
Yeah, she's a female founder who actually lived this exact transition.
Right. And the piece is called The Moment I Knew I Had to Leave. Okay, let's unpack this. Because Rowe presents a thesis that flips standard career advice entirely upside down.
Completely on its head.
She argues that for a rapidly growing number of digital professionals, the absolute best financial maneuver isn't negotiating a 5% raise.
Or getting a slightly better job in your current city.
Exactly. It's executing a deliberate, strategic relocation entirely outside of your home country.
Which, that requires a massive shift in how we process the idea of moving abroad. Because usually when someone mentions leaving the West, the conversation instantly devolves into this whole expat influencer aesthetic.
Oh yeah, the travel vlogs.
Yeah.
Retiring to a cheap villa.
Right, or just taking this extended vacation disguised as remote work.
The endless Instagram stories of someone like drinking a coconut on a beach in Bali while supposedly running an empire.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But Rowe aggressively bypasses all of that noise. She's having a strictly mechanical, strictly financial conversation here.
Right.
She makes the case that leaving the West is not a retreat from ambition. It is a strategic necessity if you actually want to acquire assets.
But to really understand the mechanics of her solution, we have to first confront the brutal math of the problem, right? Like, we have to look at what existing in the West is actually costing you, the modern digital worker.
It's grim.
It really is. And the numbers she brings to the table are just staggering when you lay them out side by side. So let's set the baseline using Rowe's data.
Okay.
The median household income in the U.S. right now is roughly $75,000 a year. Now look at the median monthly rent for a standard one-bedroom apartment in major U.S. cities. Those supposedly high-opportunity hubs like San Francisco, New York, L.A., Miami.
The places everyone says you have to be.
Right. That rent currently sits somewhere between $2,500 and $4,500 a month.
Which means, if we just run the basic arithmetic on that, you are looking at an annual burden of $30,000 to $54,000.
Wow.
And we need to pause and just be crystal clear about the reality of that number. That is up to $54,000 swallowed up every single year purely for housing.
Just for a roof over your head.
That is just the baseline cost to keep a roof over your head and a door you can lock.
And that is before you've bought a single bag of groceries.
Right.
Before you pay for a car, before health insurance premiums, utilities.
Taxes.
Yes, the massive chunk taken out by taxes. The financial structure of that life is like pumping water into a swimming pool that has a massive crack at the bottom.
Oh, I love that analogy. You're paying a massive structural premium for an environment that is rapidly draining your resources faster than you can ever replenish them.
Exactly.
And that dynamic is exactly why earning more money in these cities rarely actually feels like getting ahead. When housing consumes that much of a median income, the structural math of your life is just fundamentally broken. You cannot out-earn a system designed to extract 70% of your gross income just for basic survival.
But wait. I have to push back here because I know exactly what someone listening to this right now is thinking.
Okay, let's hear it.
They're looking at their $3,000 rent in a major city and thinking, okay, yes, it's painful, but isn't this just the necessary price of admission?
The price of admission argument.
Right. I'm paying a premium because I get access to a functional, familiar, high-opportunity society, a massive local job market. Isn't this just how the game is played?
Well, this raises an important question. What are you actually giving up to pay that so-called price of admission? Because Rowe points out something really profound about the hidden mechanics of opportunity cost.
Okay.
The cost of living in these hyper-expensive cities doesn't just drain your checking account today. It actively cannibalizes your future.
How so? Walk us through the mechanism of that.
So think about the power of compound interest and capital deployment. Every single year you spend absorbing a cost of living that eats up, say, 60 to 80% of your income.
Which is most people.
Right. That's a year you are entirely unable to build. You aren't acquiring assets. Your money is not compounding in the market. You are functionally treading water.
Just staying afloat.
Exactly. And while you are treading water, inflation is actively devaluing the tiny bit of cash you do manage to save.
So you're essentially just funding your landlord's wealth accumulation rather than your own?
Precisely. And that opportunity cost, it's invisible on a Tuesday afternoon, you know?
Right. It's not a bill you get in the mail.
No, it doesn't show up as a line item on your credit card statement. Where it shows up, as Rowe notes, is a decade down the line. It manifests as the retirement account that didn't grow fast enough to actually support you.
Oh, that's dark.
It appears as the property you could never afford to buy, the business you couldn't afford to start, because your financial margin was so razor thin that taking a calculated risk would literally mean risking homelessness.
Wow. That is a brutal realization. The idea that the West didn't necessarily fail you, but it fundamentally stopped being a mathematical environment where you can build. So if the Western cost of living is this inescapable trap, what happens when you take your bucket, your income, to a completely different economy? And this is where Rowe introduces her core strategy. She's applying the Wall Street concept of arbitrage directly to human geography.
Yes, she calls it Geo-Arbitrage.
Geo-Arbitrage.
Right, so in traditional finance, arbitrage is taking advantage of a price difference between two distinct markets. You buy low in one place and simultaneously sell high in another. Geo-arbitrage applies that exact same mechanism to your life, your labor, and your geographic location.
I see. It is the deliberate use of currency valuations and cost of living differentials to artificially multiply the effective purchasing power of your existing income.
Exactly, without having to earn a single dollar more.
Right. You don't ask your boss for a raise. You don't take on some grueling side hustle. You simply move the location where those dollars are deployed. And Rowe isn't just, a theorist pitching a crazy idea. She actually executed this.
She did.
5 years ago, she moved her life and her business from Toronto, Canada, all the way to Nairobi, Kenya.
And the data she provides to illustrate the power of this geographic pivot is just incredible. Let's take that exact same $75,000 location-independent income we just talked about.
The one getting completely devoured by a basic apartment in Miami.
Yes. If you take that income and relocate to a city like Nairobi or Salinas or Da Nang or Vlore, the math violently shifts in your favor. You instantly catapult into the top 5% of earners in that entire country.
The exact same effort, the exact same paycheck.
The exact same paycheck, but the financial reality completely inverts. In those neighborhoods in Nairobi, a furnished, high-quality two-bedroom apartment will run you roughly $800 to $1,500 a month.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because the immediate knee-jerk assumption people make when they hear $800 rent is, well, of course it's cheaper. You're downgrading your life.
Oh, totally. People assume it's a sacrifice.
Right. They think you're living in a less developed area, giving up conveniences. But Rowe is incredibly firm on correcting this misconception. Going from spending $4,000 a month in Toronto to $1,000 a month in Nairobi is not a lifestyle downgrade. She calls it a margin upgrade.
And that semantic difference is the key to understanding the entire philosophy here. A lifestyle downgrade implies you are sacrificing your baseline quality of life just to hoard a few extra dollars.
Right.
A margin upgrade means you are surgically reclaiming the massive portion of your income that was being entirely wasted on an overinflated systemic cost of living.
You're cutting the fat.
Exactly. You are buying back your margin without sacrificing your standard of living. In fact, in many of these global cities, your day-to-day quality of life actually increases because you can afford services, better food, and better healthcare out of pocket.
So the obvious question is, what happens to that reclaimed margin? If you suddenly have an extra $2,000 or $3,000 a month that isn't going to a Western landlord, what did Rowe actually do with it?
Well, it immediately transforms into deployable capital.
Capital that actually works for you.
Exactly. Capital that can be directed into vehicles that build generational wealth. In Ro's case, because she was no longer burning through 80% of her gross income just to keep the lights on, she finally had the time, the mental bandwidth, and most importantly, the financial runway to build.
Yeah, she set up a highly efficient global business structure. She developed digital products, built a content platform that currently reaches people in 40 different countries.
All while seamlessly retaining her global clients.
Right, because the internet genuinely does not care if you're sitting in a coffee shop in downtown Toronto or a co-working space in Nairobi.
It really doesn't.
Her products still sell to consumers in the US, the UK, Canada, Australia. Her top-line income stayed exactly the same, but the leverage that income provided completely changed.
You know, if we pull back and look at the underlying mechanism here, we start to expose a massive structural flaw in the Western wealth-building architecture.
Oh, absolutely.
The modern Western tax and financial system is essentially this incredibly expensive monthly subscription for a bundle of services that digital workers no longer even use.
An unused subscription. Yeah. Oh, that is a fascinating way to frame it.
It is. The system, the tax codes, the localized pension schemes, the infrastructure planning, it was all engineered for a very specific mid-20th century worker.
The person who works for one local corporation their whole life?
Right. Earns a geographically fixed salary, commutes on local trains, and retires at 65. If your life follows that exact blueprint, the subscription makes sense.
Because you're paying for the local physical job market, because you actually need the local physical job market.
Exactly. But if you are a location-independent professional, a global consultant, or an online business owner, you are paying top dollar for access to a physical corporate hub you never step foot in.
It's wild.
The system practically punishes you. It taxes your global income at exorbitant rates, but it completely ignores the very mobility that makes your digital income possible in the first place. And nowhere is this structural failure more devastatingly obvious than in asset accessibility, specifically real estate.
The housing market. This is the part of Ro's argument that feels so painfully relevant to almost everyone listening.
Oh, yeah.
In the West, the primary assets that historically build middle-class net worth, property and land, they are now some of the most expensive and inaccessible in the entire world relative to what average people actually earn.
The metrics on this are objectively grim. Ro points out the house price to income ratio, which basically measures how many years of a median salary it takes to buy a median house.
Okay.
In the UK, that ratio is currently sitting above 8. In Australia, specifically in Sydney, it's an astonishing 12.
12, meaning a standard house costs 12 times the average annual salary, and that's before you even factor in taxes or basic living expenses.
Yes. And in major US and Canadian markets, it has mathematically reached a point where first-time home buyers are effectively locked out.
Yeah.
Unless you have significant generational wealth, parents who can gift you a massive down payment, you are priced out of the very assets you desperately need to secure long-term financial stability. You're forced into leverage, taking on these massive mortgages that destroy wealth through interest payments.
And this is where Ro contrasts the Western reality with her actual reality on the ground in Kenya. Listen to this specific example because it's crazy. She notes that 1/8 of an acre of titled land in a growing peri-urban area right outside of Nairobi costs somewhere between $15,000 and $100,000.
Wow. And we need to explain why that is a fundamentally different financial game. First, let's clarify what peri-urban means.
Right.
These aren't deeply rural, disconnected plots of dirt in the middle of nowhere. Peri-urban areas are the sweet spot. They sit right on the transitional edge of city limits.
So they're in the direct path of rapid infrastructure development.
Exactly. Meaning you get in at a lower price point just before the paved roads, the fiber optic internet cables, and the commercial centers arrive.
And the phrase titled land is crucial there too, right? It means secure legal ownership.
Absolutely. But the most powerful mechanism here is the price point itself. At $15,000 to $100,000, you can actually acquire the asset in cash or, with very short-term manageable financing.
Not a 30-year trap.
Exactly. It appreciates rapidly as the city expands. You can build on it. You can generate immediate rental income from it. And crucially, you achieve all of this without trapping yourself in an extortionate Western mortgage that ultimately forces you to pay double the purchase price to the bank over your lifetime.
It's not about romanticizing life in a developing nation. It is a cold, hard calculation about asset accessibility.
Precisely.
It is the ability to acquire tangible assets that go up in value simply because the local market hasn't been hyper-financialized and priced beyond the reach of the humans actually living there.
What's fascinating here is that global governments are waking up to this macroeconomic shift vastly faster than Western institutions are.
Oh, definitely.
Entire countries are looking at the data and are now actively competing to attract these mobile, income-generating digital workers.
They see the writing on the wall. Rowe lists off a whole menu of global options that are aggressively courting people exactly like you. Like Kenya recently introduced a specific digital nomad visa designed to attract foreign remote workers.
Right.
The country of Georgia, the nation, not the U.S. state, they implemented a flat 1% tax rate for specific types of foreign earned income.
1%. And we need to look at how these policies actually function. Take Portugal's NHR program, for example, or similar frameworks in Panama and Malaysia.
Okay.
These governments are essentially saying to digital workers, if you bring your globally earned income here and you spend it in our local cafes, rent our local apartments, and hire our local services, we will severely discount or eliminate the tax on that foreign income for a set period.
It's a calculated trade-off.
Exactly. It's an incredibly smart economic bet. The government realizes that your localized daily spending is actually worth significantly more to their ground-level economy than trying to squeeze you for complex income taxes.
Makes sense.
They look at a location-independent worker and see a highly valuable, low-burden resident bringing outside capital in. The West broadly doesn't offer a comparable deal because the Western system just assumes you are physically trapped there.
Okay, I have to play the skeptic again here.
Bring it on.
The math is undeniably clear. The asset accessibility is vastly superior. Sovereign governments are literally rolling out the red carpet with tax incentives for you to arrive. But let's talk about the reality of executing this. Moving across the world is not just a spreadsheet calculation.
Oh, no, it's not.
What about the logistical nightmares? Navigating visa renewals, untangling your tax residency so your home country doesn't keep billing you, dealing with completely different legal systems? I mean, isn't this an absolute headache to actually pull off?
The logistical friction is very real, and Rowe doesn't pretend it's as easy as just booking a one-way flight.
Right.
Establishing a new legal and financial baseline takes intense, focused effort. But here is the critical distinction she makes. Navigating a year of complex logistics is a temporary headache. Staying in a system where you mathematically cannot build wealth is a permanent disaster.
Temporary friction versus permanent stagnation.
Exactly. Which brings us to the most difficult part of Rowe's entire presentation. Because if the math makes logical sense and the logistical friction is ultimately temporary and solvable, what is actually keeping you exactly where you are?
Wow. And this is where Rowe's insight shifts from the purely financial to the deeply psychological.
It gets heavy.
It does. Because she argues that the barrier to making this move is almost never about the money, and it's almost never about the visas.
No, it's much heavier than that. It's the profound cost of identity.
Moving requires a painful, fundamental admission. You have to look in the mirror and admit that the country you were born in, the city you built your entire identity around, and the system you trusted to reward your hard work is just no longer serving you.
Yeah.
And that is a massive emotional hurdle. It's not a financial calculation. It is a grieving process.
She highlights 4 specific psychological anchors that keep people paralyzed. First, there is familiarity.
Comfort.
Right. Even if you are slowly bleeding out financially, there is a deep evolutionary comfort in knowing exactly how the local system works. Second, there is the raw fear of the unknown.
Naturally.
Third, there's the crushing weight of other people's expectations. You know, the fear of what your parents will think or how your peers will judge you for stepping off the standard path.
And the fourth is probably the most insidious, the story you've been telling yourself for years. That internal monologue that says, I'll start looking into this seriously next year when the time finally feels right.
And the brutal truth of adult life is that the time never magically feels right to upend your entire existence.
Never.
But Rowe is very clear about who needs to hear this message right now. She aggressively pushes back against the outdated idea that geo-arbitrage is only for retirees on a fixed pension who are just looking for a cheap beach to spend their final decades.
Right. This strategy is tailor-made for the 35-year-old freelancer who is earning a fantastic gross income, but absolutely cannot seem to get ahead of their monthly expenses.
Yes.
It's for the 45-year-old consultant who brings in solid, reliable revenue, but whose actual net worth has been totally stagnant for 5 years. It's for the 52-year-old professional who just sat down, looked at their retirement projections, and realized with a sinking feeling that the math simply will not support their survival in the West.
If your income is fully or even partially location independent and your cost of living is eating the very margin that should be compounding to fund your future, you are exactly the person who needs to be running these calculations. You have to stop agonizing over the question, should I leave everything behind? And start asking a much better question. Where in the world is the absolute best place for my money to do what I need it to do?
So, what does this all mean? How do we synthesize everything Ro is arguing here? I think she answers it perfectly herself. Leaving the West is not a retreat.
Yeah.
It is a strategic redeployment. You are taking your income, your assets, your time, and your limited attention, and you are purposefully redeploying them to an environment where they can compound faster and with far less resistance.
It's about internalizing the philosophy that your geography should serve your financial goals, not the other way around.
Beautifully said.
But understanding the philosophy is really only step one. Actually, taking action requires a highly customized, practical plan. It requires knowing exactly what legal and financial structures you need to have in place before you ever step onto a plane.
Which brings us to the actionable next steps. Because if this deep dive has shifted something for you today, if you are tired of swimming in that leaky pool, paying for a premium subscription you don't even use, Ro provides some incredibly powerful tools to help you bridge the gap between theory and reality.
And you can find all of this at relocatewithrevenue.com.
Right. So if someone is just starting out, where do they go?
Well, if you are just beginning to process this idea, the best place to start is with what she calls the Relocation Toolkit. It is designed specifically to give you a structured framework to think through whether relocation is actually viable for your specific career, rather than just endlessly watching travel videos and daydreaming.
And one of the most innovative components of that toolkit is something called the Readiness Mirror.
Oh, that tool is brilliant.
It's a custom AI tool. You load the prompt sequence into ChatGPT or Claude, and it dynamically walks you through a highly personalized, intense set of questions to gauge your actual practical readiness to relocate.
It really tests you.
It tests your risk tolerance, your income stability, your logistical preparation. It cuts straight through the fantasy and gives you an honest mathematical assessment of where you stand.
And if you are past the initial curiosity phase, like if you've done the research, run the tool, and you are completely committed to making this leap, she offers the Digital Relocation Blueprint.
That's the heavy-duty one.
Yeah, that is the comprehensive, structured planning document to help you actually execute the move, ensuring you don't trip over tax residency traps or visa issues on your way out the door.
Again, you can find all of those resources at relocatewithrevenue.com. It's a phenomenal starting point for anyone looking to make this pivot and, reclaim their margin.
As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with one final conceptual thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We live in an unprecedented era where your skills, your specific knowledge, and your income can cross international borders instantly, like traveling as data on fiber optic cables. Your earning potential is completely historically untethered from physical space. So, if your income can live anywhere, why do we still implicitly accept the idea that our cost of living must remain anchored to a single, hyper-expensive geographic location?
Why indeed? It is an incredibly powerful question to ask yourself the next time you look at your rent or mortgage statement. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the default path, keep looking for the structural flaws in the system, and we will catch you on the next one.